7 months after my marriage, I accidentally overheard a conversation between my husband and the poor student he had been sponsoring. Joaquim, if your wife finds out that the baby she's expecting is actually our fertilized embryo, don't you think she would be so furious that she might take her own life? Beatriz said with a soft giggle. It would be more convenient if that happened. That way, everything she has would be mine, Joaquim replied coldly. But the problem would be if she decided to divorce me and kick me out of the house. That's why we need to keep this a secret. When our child inherits her wealth, we'll make the final move. That night, I pretended not to have heard anything. I gave birth to the baby and raised him with all the love I could. 24 years later, when my son returned from his studies abroad, I transferred all the shares of my company and properties into his name. During a press conference, Beatriz, the former humble young woman, appeared arm in arm with my husband, holding a maternity test. She walked up to me and declared, "André is my biological son. You've stolen him from me all these years. Now it's time to return him." My son also threw a divorce petition in front of me and, with a cold and calculating voice, said, "Sign this and divorce my father. That way, we'll finally be the family of 3 we always should have been. And considering that you gave birth to and raised me, I'll give you a monthly allowance of 200. I gave a slight smile and replied, "Okay, Camila, didn't you have an important board meeting today? Why are you still working here at the office?" Joaquim entered with a cup of warm milk, placing it delicately in front of me, using that so affectionate tone he always used. I closed my laptop and returned the smile. André's teacher mentioned that he's been a little sick lately. I've scheduled an appointment with a pediatric specialist for tomorrow, I commented. Moved. Joaquim stroked my hair. You always worry so much about André. When he grows up, he'll surely be eternally grateful to you. I looked him straight in the eye and replied firmly, "Of course, I'm his mother. If I don't take care of him, who will?" Touched by my words, Joaquim smiled warmly. "You're amazing. Marrying you and raising André together was the greatest blessing of my life." I looked into his eyes, which seemed full of sincere affection, and gave a slight smile, saying nothing. Joaquim and I had been together for 10 years. 3 years of dating and 7 years of marriage. Throughout this decade, he had always taken care of me. When I was sick or tired, he'd surprise me unexpectedly and embrace me passionately, whispering that he'd love me forever. If I hadn't overheard that conversation, I would never have believed that the man who said he loved me so much could betray me in such a way. "Aunt Beatriz, you finally arrived." André's excited voice echoed from the room. I immediately stood up and left the office, only to see Beatriz entering confidently. She picked up my son in her arms and kissed his cheek, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Did you miss me, little André?" she asked, her eyes falling on me. Her smile faltered for a moment, and her expression changed to something between discomfort and surprise. Before she could say anything, Joaquim quickly stepped forward to explain. "Darling, there was an outdoor activity between parents and children at André's kindergarten today. I thought you'd be too busy with work, so I asked Beatriz to help." Beatriz put André down and quickly added, somewhat nervously, Yes, Camila, you've done so much for me over the years, and I've always wanted to give something back. When Joaquim called me, I didn't hesitate to come." Hearing her clumsy attempts to justify her presence, I couldn't help but remember the day I gave birth to my son. Beatriz had also been at the hospital that day, accompanying Joaquim under the pretext of meeting the baby. While I was enduring contractions, she paced nervously down the hallway, twisting her hands in impatience. When she found out it was a boy, she ran to the baby, picked him up in her arms, and refused to let go. Her eyes were gleaming with happiness, reddened by emotion. A nurse, unable to hold back a smile, asked jokingly, "Who are you to the baby? You seem more excited than the mother herself." Beatriz, a little embarrassed, tried to explain when she noticed my silence. "Camila, I couldn't help it. André is just so adorable that I ended up kissing him without realizing." "You're not upset, are you?" I smiled lightly and replied calmly, "Of course not. I've been so busy with work that sometimes I end up neglecting my family." I really appreciate you being willing to help with André." Upon hearing this, both Beatriz and Joaquim seemed to relax. André ran to me with an innocent expression and asked, "Mommy, are you going to work today or are you going to the kindergarten with Daddy and me?" I stroked his head and asked gently, "What do you prefer Mommy to do?" Without hesitation, André replied, "I want Mommy to work and Aunt Beatriz to take Daddy and me to kindergarten." As if fearing that André might say something inappropriate, Joaquim quickly picked him up and explained, "Darling, André just wants you to not be distracted from your work. Last time, he even asked me not to disturb you because you're working so hard." Beatriz nodded and commented, "André is such a thoughtful child, with such an incredible mother like you, Camila. No wonder he's so well-mannered." I responded to my son, "Very well. We'll do what André says." Upon hearing this, André jumped with joy, completely ignoring my presence, and took Beatriz and Joaquim's hands, leading them to the door, watching as they walked away together. I let a slight smile cross my face before returning to my office. Maybe they thought I didn't notice anything, but I was more aware than they imagined. I watched the trio leave the house as if they were a perfect family. André, holding Beatriz and Joaquim's hands, looked so happy, so innocent, oblivious to everything that was really going on around him. The smile on Beatriz's face was shameless, triumphant. Joaquim, in turn, displayed an almost dismissive confidence, as if he was certain he'd never be discovered. I calmly closed the door and returned to my studio, but my mind was far from work. This constant act had been going on for years, but now they were crossing all boundaries. Beatriz was so comfortable in my home that it was almost as if she owned the place. My own son, the one I carried for 9 months, the one I raised and protected, didn't even hesitate to prefer her company. My life had become a spectacle of humiliation. For a long time, I had stayed silent, planning. Today, something inside me had changed. It was time to act. I knew I couldn't act impulsively, so I sat down and began to organize my thoughts. I needed to dismantle their false happiness, little by little, with precision. I had enough information to destroy Joaquim and Beatriz in a way they wouldn't recover from any time soon. My hands trembled slightly as I typed on the computer, gathering all the documents, emails, and evidence I had accumulated over the years. Joaquim thought I was naive, but he didn't know that I had access to all his bank accounts, his emails, and even the messages he exchanged with Beatriz. I spent the following weeks acting normally, playing my role as wife and mother. I prepared dinners, took care of the house, and even kept my work routine, but inside, I was setting the perfect stage for my revenge. I started with Joaquim. One morning, while he was having breakfast, I casually mentioned that the company was going through financial difficulties. "I'll need your signature for some transfers." I lied, handing him a fake document that actually transferred some of his shares to my name. Joaquim, distracted as always, signed without reading. In the meantime, I kept Beatriz busy with the constant favors she asked for. She thought she was taking advantage of me, but I was using each of her requests as an opportunity to gather more proof of her financial dependence on Joaquim, which I knew would be useful in the future. André's birthday was the turning point. As always, we threw a big party at home. Beatriz arrived early, carrying a huge gift, pretending to be the perfect godmother. Joaquim couldn't hide the sparkle in his eyes when he saw her. Throughout the party, they exchanged knowing glances, and André ran to her arms as if she were his real mother. Watching that scene was painful, but it also filled me with a determination I had never felt before. When all the guests had left, I approached André. He was sitting on the couch, excited about the presents he had received. I sat next to him and calmly asked, "André, do you think Aunt Beatriz likes you a lot?" He smiled. "Of course, Mommy. She always brings me cool stuff and plays with me." I nodded, trying to stay calm. "And do you think your dad likes her a lot too?" André paused for a moment, clearly confused by the question. "I think so. They're friends, right?" I smiled and stroked his hair. "Yes, of course, friends." André's innocence cut me like a knife. But I knew he was just a pawn in Joaquim and Beatriz's game. I couldn't blame him, but I also couldn't let him remain oblivious to the truth for much longer. I needed to protect him, even if it meant destroying the image he had of his father. A few weeks later, the plan was in motion. First, I contacted the family lawyer, someone Joaquim had always trusted blindly, but who, in reality, was more loyal to me. I explained the situation and showed him the evidence I had gathered. He was shocked but agreed to help me. We prepared the documents to freeze Joaquim's accounts and ensure he wouldn't have access to any of the family assets. On the day everything came crashing down for him, I made sure to be home. Joaquim arrived early from work, clearly upset. "Camila, why are my accounts blocked? What did you do?" he shouted as he entered the room. I was sitting on the couch, calmly sipping a cup of tea. I looked at him with the calmest smile I could manage. "I froze everything. I thought it would be safer this way. After all, you and Beatriz have a history of spending money irresponsibly." Joaquim's face turned pale. "How do you know about?" Before he could finish, Beatriz ran into the house with a panicked expression. "Joaquim, my account is blocked too. I can't access anything." I slowly stood up and walked over to them. "You two thought you could deceive me forever, didn't you? But you forgot one thing. Never underestimate someone who has patience and access to information." I showed them a stack of documents. "Here are all the proofs of the transfers you made to Beatriz, the records of the times you used the company's money to pay her debts, and even the messages where you discussed how to deceive me." Beatriz tried to justify herself, but I interrupted her. "I've already sent everything to the board of directors and to the lawyer. Oh, and Joaquim, the divorce is already in progress. Good luck trying to keep anything after our assets are divided." I finished with a triumphant smile. They stood frozen, speechless, while I turned and walked upstairs. In that moment, I knew I had won. No matter what happened next, I had regained control of my life, and they were finally paying the price for their betrayal. After that day, Joaquim and Beatriz's lives began to unravel in an inevitable way. They tried to regain control, but every move they made was anticipated by me. I had left them without financial resources, publicly exposed, and that was just the beginning. The first thing I did was formalize the divorce. With all the evidence I presented to the court, including the misappropriation of company funds to finance Beatriz's whims and the messages where they planned to take everything from me, the judge had no doubts. He granted me all marital assets and full custody of André. Although he wasn't biologically my son, Joaquim's lawyer tried to argue that André should stay with him, but I had already prepared another move, a testimony from the school's board, reporting how Joaquim allowed Beatriz to act like his mother and the emotional neglect with which he treated me. The financial impact was devastating for Joaquim. Without access to the frozen accounts and with the company shares transferred to my name, he lost all power. The members of the board of directors, who had once feared him, quickly pushed him out of the company. The only thing left for him was public humiliation. The newspapers started to spread the story of his betrayals, and he became the laughingstock in the social circles he once held dear. Beatriz, on the other hand, tried to stay close to André, but it didn't take long for her true nature to be exposed. I discovered that she had accumulated debts while pretending to build a business that, in reality, never existed. Without access to Joaquim's or my money, she was forced to sell all her belongings to try to pay off what she owed. She even tried to get close to André directly, but he, finally realizing her character, began rejecting her. He was young, but not naive. Over time, Beatriz's lies and manipulations became evident to him. As for André, it was a difficult journey. He was confused and resentful at first, not knowing whom to trust. To him, Joaquim was still his father, and Beatriz had been a maternal figure throughout most of his childhood. But I knew that time and the truth were on my side. It took months, but I managed to rebuild our relationship. The truth was gradually revealed to him, in a way he could understand who had truly been there for him during all the important moments of his life. Joaquim tried to rebuild his life, but every door he knocked on was closed. The influence he once had disappeared. Without money, allies, and the image of a powerful man, he ended up moving to a small town, where he lives in a modest apartment, depending on occasional jobs. Whenever I see news about him, which is rare, since he's fallen into obscurity, I realize that the man who once humiliated me is nothing but a shadow of what he was. And honestly, I don't feel anything. Neither hatred nor pity. He is insignificant now. Beatriz disappeared from the city. I heard through acquaintances that she went to live with a distant sister, but the contact between them didn't last long. Beatriz was never someone who could support herself, and without anyone to finance her luxuries or tolerate her arrogance, she soon faded into obscurity. Once, years later, I received a letter from her. It was pathetic. She apologized, but not out of true remorse. She wanted money. I tore up the letter without responding. Finally felt free. The divorce, although painful at first, was the best thing that could have happened. I took full control of the company and restructured it, distancing anyone who was loyal to Joaquim. Under my leadership, profits grew, and soon, the company became known not only for its financial success but also for the values I implemented. I became a respected woman in the business world, and I never let anyone underestimate me again. André, for his part, grew up. He went to university and, after understanding the whole story, started to admire me more than ever. Today, we have a strong relationship. He knows that, although we are not biologically related, I am his true mother. He visits me whenever he can and even started working at the company. Despite everything, I raised André to be fair and honest, unlike his biological father. I am proud of the man he has become. I look back and see that everything I went through transformed me. I am no longer the naive woman who allowed Joaquim and Beatriz to play with my life. Now, I am someone who learned to stand up for myself and protect what is mine. My revenge was complete, but more importantly, it was just. I let each one reap exactly what they sowed, without dirtying my hands directly. Today, I live in peace. Joaquim and Beatriz are just names from the past, echoes of a story that no longer affects me. My life moved on, and I can proudly say that I won. My success, my freedom, and André's love are the only answers I need for anything that happened. They lost everything while I got my life back, and that, for me, is more than enough.